What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Episode 3. We are on a roll. Okay, so today, before I get in today's topic, I need to ask you something. And I need you to actually think about it before you answer. Don't look it up, just pull from memory. How do you spell Berenstain Bears? Berenstein or Brenstain? Sit with that for a second. Because depending on how you answered that question, today's episode is either going to feel like a fun trip down a rabbit hole or it's going to make you question something fundamental about the nature of your own memory, about reality, about whether the world you remember living in is actually the world that existed. Today, we're talking about the Mandela Effect. And I promise you, by the time we're done here, we're going to go somewhere most people never take this conversation. We're starting with the fun stuff, the pop culture examples everyone argues about. And then we're going layer by layer until we end up somewhere that's genuinely unsettling in the best possible way. Buckle up. Let's go. Let's start at the beginning. The term Mandela Effect was coined by a researcher and writer named Fiona Broome around 2009 or 2010. She was at a conference talking to people and mentioned that she remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. She remembered it clearly. She remembered news coverage of it. She remembers his funeral. She remembered his wife giving a speech. Here's the problem: Nelson Mandela did not die in prison in the 1980s. He was released from prison in 1990, became the president of South Africa, won the Nobel Peace Prize, and lived until 2013. But when Fiona Broome brought this up at the conference, something unexpected happened. Other people said the same thing. Not one or two people. Multiple people at this conference said they had the same memory. They remembered him dying in prison. They remembered the coverage. They had detailed, specific, confident memories of something that, by all documented evidence, did not happen. And that is where the name comes from. That is the moment that kicked off a conversation that has been growing ever since. Because what do you do with that? What do you do when a large group of people share a detailed memory of something that the historical record says never occurred? That is the Mandela Effect. A collective misremembering, a shared false memory. Something that a significant number of people remember one way, clearly, specifically, confidently. The evidence says happened differently, or in some cases didn't happen at all. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because it turns out Nelson Mandela was just the beginning. Let me run through some of the most well known ones. And as I go through these, I want you to check yourself. Because I guarantee at least one of these is going to stop you cold. The Berenstain Bears, the children's book series, The Bears, How do you spell the family's name? Almost everyone I've ever talked to remembers it being Berenstain with the EIN at the end, like Einstein. It felt like a Jewish family name, and the EIN ending just made sense. But the books have always been spelled with the AIN at the end. Go look right now. Every single book ever published has the AIN at the end instead of EIN. And yet, millions of people, not just a few, millions, remember EIN with absolute certainty. Some of them remember EIN spelling so strongly that when they see AIN, they feel like they are looking at something that was changed. The Monopoly Man, Rich Uncle Pennybags, the guy on the Monopoly box. Does he have a monocle? Most people say yes without even hesitating. The little round eyeglass over one eye. They can picture it. They can describe it with detail. He has never had a monocle. Not on any version of the game. Not in any official network. Ever. But the memory of that monocle is so widespread and so specific that it's one of the most argued examples in the entire Mandela Effect conversation. Sinbad's Shazaam. This one is wild. A huge number of people, particularly people who grew up in the 1990s, remember a movie called Shazaam, starring the comedian Sinbad, where he played the genie. They remember watching it. Some people remember specific scenes. Some people remember renting it from Blockbusters. This movie does not exist. It was never made. Sinbad has confirmed multiple times that he never made a genie movie. The closest thing that existed was a 1996 movie called Kazam, starring Shaquille O'Neal as a genie. But that is a completely different person in a completely different movie. And yet, the Shazam memory is so persistent and so detailed in so many people that Sinbad himself said it's one of the strangest things that has ever happened to him. Kit Kat. Is there a hyphen in the name Kit Kat? Most people say yes, with a hyphen in the middle. There has never been a hyphen. It's always been Kit Kat, no hyphen. Go look at the rapper. Febreze, one E or two. Most people spell it with two E's. It's always been Febreze with one E. C3PO's leg. Star Wars fans, pay attention. Is C3PO's is C3PO entirely gold? Most people say yes. His right leg from the knee down has always been silver in every single movie, but almost nobody remembers the silver leg. Go back and look at the original trilogy. It's right there. Luke, I am your father. One of the most quoted movie lines in history. Except Darth Vader never says that. There is no line. There, the actual line is, "No, I am your father." The word Luke is not in the line, not in the movie. People have been misquoting it for decades, and almost everyone is convinced they remember hearing Luke said first. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, Snow White, the evil queen." How does the line go? "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" That's what everyone remembers. The actual line in the 1937 Disney film is "Magic mirror on the wall," not "mirror, mirror." Magic mirror. Go check it. Now, here's what I want you to notice as I go through these. These are not obscure memories. They are not things people half remember from childhood. These things are people are certain about, specific, detailed, confident. And in every case, the documented evidence says they are wrong. So, what's actually going on? Before we get into any wild theories, and we're going to get there, I promise, it is important to understand something about memory that most people were never taught. Because the way we think memory works is almost completely wrong. We treat memory like a video recording. Like somewhere in our brain, there's a hard drive. And when we experience something, it gets saved to that drive. And when we want to remember it, we play back the file. Clean, accurate, preserved. That is not how memory works. Not even close. Memory is a reconstruction. Every single time you remember something, your brain is not playing back a recording. It's actively rebuilding that memory from fragments. And in the gaps, the parts it does not have clear data for, it fills in information based on what it expects to be there, based on patterns, based on context, based on what makes sense given everything else you know. And here's the part that should make your hair stand up. Every time you remember something and then put it away again, you are not storing the original memory. You're storing the reconstruction, which means every time you recall a memory, you have the potential to slightly alter it. The memory you're saving back is the rebuilt version, not the original. Memory researchers call this reconsolidation. It is documented, it is real. And it means that the longer you have had a memory and the more times you have recalled it, the further it may have drifted from what actually happened. There's also something called the misinformation effect, which was researched extensively by a psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus. She showed in study after study that the people's memories of events could be altered by information they received after the fact. You could tell someone a detail about something they witnessed that was completely false, and they would incorporate that false detail into their memory of the event and swear it was always there. This has a this has massive implications, not for the Mandela effect, but for eyewitness testimony, for legal cases, for everything. So, from a purely scientific standpoint, there's a reasonable explanation for at least some of the Mandela effect. Our brains are pattern matching machines. When we see Berenstain Bears, our brains know that Stein is a common ending for that type of uh, name, and autocorrects to what makes more sense linguistically. When we picture the Monopoly man, our brain associates wealth, old gentleman of that era with the monocle and fills one in. When we quote Darth Vader, we add the word Luke because it makes the line feel more complete and dramatic. That explanation covers a lot of ground, but here's where I'm going to be honest with you. It does not cover everything because the shared nature of these memories, the fact that people who have never met, who grew up in different countries, who have no connection to each other, all misremember the exact same thing the exact same way. That is harder to explain with individual brain quirks. That is something else. Here's where we leave the scientific textbook and step into something that simultaneously a legitimate area of physics research and one of the most mind-bending ideas you can sit with. What if the people who remember Berenstain with the EIN are not misremembering? What if they are correctly remembering a reality that no longer exists? Because at some point, the timeline shifted. This is the parallel universe theory of the Mandela Effect. And it goes something like this: quantum physics has a framework called the many worlds interpretation, proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. The basic idea is that every time a quantum event occurs, every time something happens at the subatomic level, that could go one of several ways. The universe actually splits. Every possible outcome occurs just in different branches of reality. An almost infinite number of parallel universes exist simultaneously, each one slightly or significantly different from the others. Most physicists who work with this framework think of the branches as completely inaccessible to each other. You live in your branch and you never experience the others. But the Mandela Effect theory asks, what if that is not always true? What if at certain points timelines converge or overlap? What if some people have, at some point, crossed from one branch of reality into another? One that's almost identical to the one they left, but with small, specific differences. One branch, the Bears, Berenstain, and another, there are Berenstain. In one branch, the Monopoly man has a monocle. and another he never did. And when a group of people cross, or when timelines bleed into each other, they carry their original memories into the new reality. Their memories are not wrong, they are just memories from somewhere else. I want to be clear, this has not been proven. There is no experiment that has confirmed people are crossing between timelines. But here is what is interesting: the many worlds interpretation itself is not a fringe idea. It is a seriously debated framework in quantum physics. Some of the most respected physicists in the world consider it a valid model. The branching of realities is something that gets laughed out of academic journals. The only leap, and it's a significant one, is whether those branches could ever intersect in a way that humans could experience. But the question is worth sitting with, especially when you consider how specific and consistent the shared memories are. Not vague impressions, not half remembered things, detailed, confident, specific memories that match across people with no connection to each other. That is either the most extraordinary coincidence in the history of human cognition, or it's pointing at something. Okay, let's go one layer deeper. You have probably heard of simulation theory, the idea that most famously articulated by philosopher Nick Bostrom and popularized by Elon Musk, among others, that our reality is not base reality, that what we experience are or as the physical world is actually a sophisticated simulation running on some kind of computational substrate we can't access or perceive. It sounds like science fiction, but the philosophical argument behind it is surprisingly hard to dismiss. The basic version goes like this: if it's possible to create a realistic simulation of conscious experience, and we're already building increasingly realistic virtual environments, then eventually a civilization advanced enough could run simulations of entire realities. If even one such simulation gets created, the odds heavily favor that we are in one of the simulated copies rather than the original. Because by definition, there would be vastly more simulated realities than the base reality. Now, here's where the Mandela Effect walks in. If we are inside a simulation, then what we experience as physical reality is essentially code running on something, maintained by something, and code can be patched. Code can be updated. Code can be corrected when errors are found. The Mandela Effect, through the lens of simulation theory, might not be a memory error at all. It might be the experience of a patch being applied. The simulation gets updated. The Berenstain Bears spelling gets corrected. The Monopoly man's monocle gets removed. The line just adjusts. And the records change. But some people's memory files did not get overwritten cleanly. Some of us are still running on the old version of the data. When we remember what was there before the patch, because something in our recall function is pulling from a cached version of reality that no longer matches the current build. A glitch in the matrix, not metaphorically, literally. And here's the thing that makes this more just a fun thought experiment. There are physicists, serious ones, not people on YouTube, who are actively researching whether our universe shows signs of being computational in nature, whether the fabric of reality at the very smallest scales behaves more like information processing than a continuous physical medium. The results are not conclusive, but the research exists. The question is being asked at the highest levels of physics and philosophy. And I can't do this episode without talking about CERN. Because every time the Mandela Effect comes up in serious conversation, CERN shows up eventually. CERN is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. They operate the Large Hadron Collider, which is the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator, running in a circular tunnel about 27 kilometers beneath the border of France and Switzerland. What they do there, in very simplified terms, is accelerate particles at near the speed of light and smash them into each other to study what happens at the most fundamental levels of matter and energy. This is how the Higgs boson, the so called God particle, was confirmed in 2012. The conspiracy theory, and I want to be clear that this is a theory, there is no verified evidence supporting it, is that experiments at CERN are doing something to the fabric of reality. That the energies involved in these collisions are creating disturbances, tears, or fluctuations at the quantum level that are rippling outward in ways scientists either do not understand or are disclosing. And that the Mandela effect, the timeline shifts, the reality glitches began or intensified around the time CERN ramped up its operations. People have mapped the Mandela Effect reports against CERN experiment timelines and claimed correlations. Again, not verified, not scientific, but the pattern has enough people talking about it that it deserves to be acknowledged. What I find interesting is not whether CERN is causing timeline shifts. I genuinely do not know. What I find interesting is what it says about where we are as a civilization, that this is even a question anyone feels the need to ask. We have built a machine powerful enough that a significant number of people believe, seriously believe, that it might be capable of destabilizing reality itself. Whatever you think about the theory, the fact that we have reached the point technologically is something worth pausing on. All right. I told you at the beginning, we're going somewhere. Most people never take this conversation. This is that place. Let's set aside the pop culture examples for a second. Let's set aside the Monopoly Man and the Bears and the movie that doesn't exist. And let's ask the real question hiding underneath all of it. If memory can be collectively wrong, if thousands of people can share a detailed, confident, specific false memory, how much of what any of us remembers is actually true? Not the Berenstain Bears, your life, your childhood, your relationships, the things you believe about yourself based on how you remember being treated, the stories you tell about who you are and where you came from, the memories that shaped your identity. How much of that is accurate? How much of it is reconstruction? How much of it is your brain filling in gaps with what made sense, what fit the pattern, what you needed the story to be? This is not a comfortable question, but I think it is the most important one because this topic raises. Because memory researchers have shown us that eyewitness testimony, the thing our entire legal system used to treat as gold standard evidence, is deeply unreliable. People misremember faces. People misremember sequences of events. People incorporate details they heard afterward into their memory of what they witnessed firsthand, not because they are lying, because that is how memory works. So, what does that mean for the story you carry about yourself? Maybe the conversation you remember going badly did not go the way you remember. Maybe the person you remember being unkind to was having a moment you did not have the context to understand. Maybe the version of your childhood that lives in your head is a reconstructive build by a younger version of you who was doing the best that they could to make sense of things. And the reconstruction has been recalled and rebuilt so many times that it has drifted significantly from what has happened. And for anyone listening who is neurodivergent, and based on the response to episode 2, I know a lot of you are. This hits different because ADHD affects working memory. Autism affects how sensory and social information gets encoded in the first place. The way a neurodivergent brain experiences and stores moments is already different from the standard, which means the gap between what happened and what you remember may be wider than it is for other people. And that is not a flaw, but it is something worth knowing. It is something worth being gentle with yourself about. the memories that hurt you the most, the ones you have carried the longest, the ones that have calcified into beliefs about who you are and what you deserve. Those are the reconstructions you have recalled the most times, which means they've had the most opportunities to drift, to get filled in with things that were not there, to become something your brain built rather than something that actually happened that way. I'm not saying your pain is not real. I'm not saying the story your brain built around the pain might not be as accurate as it feels. And there is kind of a freedom in it if you're willing to sit with it. We started with the Berenstain Bears and we ended up here. This is kind of what I love about this stuff. The Mandela Effect on the surface is fun. It's a great party trick. It is the thing you bring up at dinner and watch everyone argue about for an hour. But underneath it, underneath the pop culture debate and the conspiracy theories and the physics, there is something that I think is genuinely worth your time. The question of what we actually know, what we can actually trust. How much of reality is something that exists out there, and how much of it is something our brains are reconstructing in real time. And I think sitting with that question, really sitting with it instead of reaching for a quick answer, makes you more curious, more humble, and more honest about the world and about yourself. Whether the Mandela effect is mass false memory or a glitch in a simulation or the echo of a timeline that shifted or something we don't have the language for yet, I do not know. I genuinely do not know. And I'm comfortable with that because I think the people who are most dangerous are the ones who are too comfortable with certainty. Stay curious, stay open, question everything, including your own memory. That is episode 3. If this one got your brain going, share it. Send it to the person who is going to text you back at midnight with a list of their own Mandela Effect examples. You know who that is. Next episode tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. I'll talk to you then. As always, stay you, be you, and do you.